Welcome to our third, although it's really our second because our first one really had to get postponed, but our second kind of scientific, first we did reading last week. This week we're going to do scientific writing. So I think it's going to be really beneficial for everyone. Hopefully lots of good information for you. Once again, my name is Gareth Jones. I am the Assistant Director in the Office of Service Learning and Undergraduate Research here at UAB. And I help coordinate these workshops as well as the social engagement opportunities. It's great to see some of you in person last Friday that came to the scavenger hunt, and those who came to that got a delicious popsicle as well as a t-shirt and a few other swag items. So thank you again to everyone who was able to survive the humidity last week, which was rather intense. But we have some more coming up. There's a movie night coming up next week. We will be sending out the final details on that tomorrow. So make sure to check your email for that. Again, that's another opportunity to kind of socially engage and get to know other people from other programs here this summer. So, all right, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint here. All right, can everyone see that okay? All right, awesome. No one's telling me no in the chats. Well, maybe there is one person in the chat. Just double check here. Nope, I think that we just got our last person here, Grace Whipple. All right, awesome. All right, so we're going to talk about scientific writing today. And again, it's a nice companion piece to the scientific reading that was from last week. Again, that is accessible. We will be sending out or we already sent out a copy of the PowerPoint to all the programmers that will get it to you. Some good information in there, and it's a nice companion piece to today's presentation. So today, again, you get me this week, so I'm going to talk a lot about scientific writing. It was originally presented in the spring, and we have a nice recording of this also from Shannon Lynch on our YouTube channel. All right, so let's get started here. All right, so there's kind of a preview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about formatting your papers, strategies for writing, for citation. We're going to give you some resources that will hopefully improve your writing. We're going to talk about authorship, and we'll talk a bit about the revision process. All right, so as I said earlier, this is kind of a companion piece to last week's scientific literacy seminar. It's very beneficial, so you can obviously review that. You don't have to have seen it or attended that, but it does add some extra level to what we're talking about today. So yeah, there's a lot of examples, obviously, of scientific writing, and you've all gone through English classes and all of these different things, but scientific writing is different. It's also has many similarities with what you've done in those things, and obviously grammar and punctuation and all those things. There's a lot of need for that still, but you'll be doing a lot of writing. Sometimes people go into research and they think, oh, you'll just be doing experiments and you'll just be, presenting. But there is a lot of writing that's involved in that too, and hopefully writing that leads to publications, peer-reviewed publications, right, or articles, or maybe even writing textbooks down the line, right? So there's a lot of examples of scientific writing. And obviously, when you reduce it down to its basic level, is to communicate and explain the findings that you have found and the observations you have made about your research. So some things to keep in mind, of course, is that it should be clear and concise. Now, does that mean using language that anyone can understand? Again, it depends on the publication, but for a lot of the writing that you're going to be using a lot of specific jargon, but at the same time, you do want it to be very clear and concise. You don't want any items in there that aren't necessary. Obviously, you want accuracy is super important as well, that the writing that you present has the findings accurately presented. And telling a story. This is really important. And I come from a humanities background. But I still believe firmly that even when you are writing about science, there is a story there, and that's really important to be able to tell that story in a way that pulls the reader in, like interests them. Right? That's important. So you aren't just laying out the data, but you're telling a story, and telling people why it's important, why it's significant, why they should read it, all those types of things. So those are some things that we'll chat about. All right, so let's tackle the formatting question at the start here. So a couple of different things, different formats that you are going to start using if you're not already using. The academic side, a lot of you I'm sure have learned MLA. That's obviously big in the humanities. It's good to still know how to use it. But in the scientific, you're going to be using the AMA, American Medical Association, quite a bit, right, for your STEM fields. And it's laid out differently in the scientific format versus the academic format. But again, sometimes there's interdisciplinary that has elements of both of these. All right, so maybe you did a series of paintings that represent some kind of chemical reaction. All right, so you're still going to have some different formats for both of those. But we'll go over specifically kind of the scientific side today. We'll talk a lot about this IMRD layout, which just stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. And what's important about that is that it really corresponds to a poster or an oral presentation. So the presentations that you'll be giving later this summer will be in that format, very similar. So, you mirror your writing with your presentations, right? So the IMRD structure, obviously, as I just said, it's fairly simple in what it stands for, but it is important that you go in this order, right? Sometimes people do put these things out of order, and it can be very confusing to the reader. So you start off with an introduction, all right? That gives the basic background information, why it's relevant, why this topic is important, why someone should read it, and the goals of the author. Or the authors, and very often with journals and with scientific writing, there are multiple authors. The methods: how did you gather that information? How did you collect your data? How were the experiments conducted? All right, those are very important to be clear and concise. You're going to hear me say that over and over: clear and concise. All right, it's really important that you outline the methods that you used for your research. And of course, the exciting part, hopefully, the results, right? The figures that show the data that you collected, and you often will have descriptions with these. It'll outline the findings that your experiments had, all those things that are exciting that you have in your results. And then D for discussion. Okay, the authors address significant findings and the limitations of the study. So this is also lines up with conclusion, that you had a hypothesis, you did an experiment to test that hypothesis, you had your results, and then you discuss or make your conclusions as to the results of that research, and also what didn't happen, what went wrong, or what are the limitations of this study. Those are all things that need to be part of your writing. The abstract, and we talked about this last week. Some of you, I'm sure, have already written abstracts. The abstract is due for the expo. There's a holding place for it on July 16th, but again, you will upload an abstract for everyone to read that outlines your research at the expo for your presentation. And another way of looking at this, as we have on this slide, is an elevator pitch, or in film terms, it's a preview. All right, I like to often say they're really good previews that kind of outline what we're going to see in a movie, that get us really interested, that provide intrigue. An abstract can have that level as well. It's starting to tell your story. So the abstract is really important. Our abstracts are limited to 250 words or less. So clear and concise in your abstract is also important. Okay, some other elements that you can put, or sections that you can put in your writing: you can have analysis that has some similarities to the results discussion. Sometimes it's a combination of those. You can analyze the results and then discuss that analysis. Your conclusions, as I said, that's very similar to the discussion that you have there. You can add additional figures, provide additional information. Some journals require these, some may limit the amount of supplemental figures that you can put in. So again, that's why it's really important for the actual writing portion to be clear and concise, right? Acknowledgements. Okay, it may seem obvious, but you absolutely want to acknowledge, your mentors, obviously your fellow authors, anyone that you've collaborated with. You need to make sure everyone gets their due, right? Including those that gave you money, right? Those funding resources, that's important. And then references, you don't want to be accused of plagiarism. So if you are directly citing something, make sure that it's cited correctly and that your references are there. All right, so let's talk about some strategies now for writing and for citations. So for writing, one of the background on the research is so important. The literature review. All right, we talked a bit about this last week about reading lit reviews, but also obviously before you write, you're going to do a review of the other types of research that's being done. And this is going to help you get ideas. Just going out there and reading journal articles is a great way to get inspired, to think about research that you want to do, and to find out what has already been done. Because again, research, when you take it down to its basic level, is adding new knowledge to the world, right? So you want to make sure that you are adding to something, that you're part of that discussion, that you're not repeating something that someone else has already put out there. One way to help with this is to create a concept map. Okay, that's one nice way to kind of organize things and structure things. You can also use an outline, but organizing your thoughts and the plans that you have for your writing is really important. Maybe you need to have a free write, and using a timer for that is important. Again, as I'm sure you've experienced, and I'm sure you've all said, it's the old cliche, the hardest thing about writing is writing the first word, right? And so sometimes a free write is a great way to just start the process, get the motor on and get the train in motion, if I can mix all my metaphors here. But you can always revise later, right? But sometimes a free write with a very specific timer, you can use your phone, of course, is a great strategy to get the ball rolling, all right? But find what works best for you. Again, could be a combination of these things, could be a specific thing that we just discussed. Maybe it's something else that you have that is really helpful for you to start writing. But here are some additional strategies that we can suggest. You can start with the easiest section to write. That gets momentum going. Or maybe you want to tackle the most difficult section first so that you can then have the ease of writing the easier parts later. You want to dedicate chunks of your time to write about the experiments, all right? Time management is a huge part of the writing process, right? Great writers often have a designated time, like a Stephen King or although some might argue he's not a great writer, some people do, or like an Ernest Hemingway, again, same thing. But other writers, a lot of them have a very specific time that they write. Maybe it's first thing they do when they get up in the morning before the sun rises. Maybe it's at 2 a.m., right? But again, your body, your time management, the best ways to manage that when you can start tackling the writing. Detailed notes are very, very important. So the lab notebook that you use, and also the literature review, and we're going to go over a few other tools you can use. Those notes are invaluable, right? As you summarize some of the things that you find through findings, all right? So make sure to do that. Citation, okay? You don't want to be accused of plagiarism. You want to cite everything accurately. And boy, you have a lot of great tools like Endnote and EasyBib that are very helpful for this. Back in my day, I had to have a different approach, right? But nowadays, you can use these apps and these tools to help you with your citation. All right. Make sure that you use your tabs. Obviously, using your search engines is a great way to kind of keep order with your citations so that they're cited properly into your writing. You want to make sure that you're using the right formatting style. With AMA, we talked about that being the primary one for the medical fields and for the sciences. But there are others, as I said, there's MLA, there's APA, there's a lot of different formatting styles, but make sure that you're using the correct one for the journal that you're submitting to. Talk to your mentor as you're getting through that process. Literature matrix, again, that's a lit survey, but it's put it into a beautiful format that makes it easier to keep track of all of those references that you're making. And just, again, make sure that you're double checking everything. Sometimes plagiarism is an accident. Sometimes it's very intentional, but sometimes it absolutely can be an accident. Just make sure that you are citing things properly, that you are giving credit where credit is due. All right, that you aren't, and especially if you're summarizing or you're paraphrasing, those are sometimes areas where people forget to cite. Make sure that you cite properly. Okay, I know you've heard it before, but again, it's really important in every form that you're writing. So here's an example of Endnote to help you kind of organize these things in a structured way, and also to look at databases. And we talked a lot about databases and looking for things like that last week. But keywords are really important, specific terms. An author, if you have a specific scientist that you're following, maybe you follow ResearchGate and there's an author that you want to research. Maybe there's a particular journal that you really think is connected to your research, all those things. But EndNote helps you group these things together so that it's easier to find them and easier to cite when you get into your text, right? You don't want to have to reformat everything, right? All right, so literature matrix, we just referenced that. So here's a quick kind of definition and explanation of what that is. So it's an annotated bibliography with a summary of each source. I'm going to show you an example of it here in a moment, but you're going to record your relevant search terms. You're going to reference your databases because, again, when you get into scientific writing, the ability to reproduce an experiment is really important. Those are things they're going to test. So you want to make sure that it's accurate. All right. You want to be able to have all this information there on your matrix, right? So that you can easily reference these things. Helps you keep tracks of specific study data. These things right here, very, very important. These examples, you want to make sure you have those in your lab notebook. Maybe you're using an eLab notebook, but again, you want to make sure that those things are organized and structured so you can get them into your writing accurately. Links to the websites or PDF of the materials that you're using. Again, organization, formatting, structure, super important here. And then this summarization of the data, again, so you can cite it properly, all right? So you're not falling into plagiarism, but this helps you, this literature makes it easier. So here's an example, all right? So that's color coded and all those things. And again, it takes a little bit to build this, but once you've got it built and you start populating these things, it makes your writing a lot easier, right? You've got all this stuff here, especially some of the summaries and things like that. It's really important to have this structure because it will make your science writing much easier. So you can be clear and concise, all right? All those important things. So that's an example of that. And again, I will be sending out this PowerPoint slide to you so you can look at this in depth. I know it's a little bit small right now. Maybe you're on a smaller screen, but I'll send you the PowerPoint so you can really examine it. So let's talk about resources to help your actual writing, okay? It's always important to improve your writing. Doesn't matter how old you get, you can always improve it. You can always look for additional ways to help you. All right, so we talked about organization. We talked about having a plan, being clear and concise. A timeline, as we are exhibiting here with this table of contents, helps you structure things. And also, as it says, hold you accountable, right? Especially if you share that with friends, colleagues, maybe your mentor gives you a timeline for your writing. All right, so, but if you have a timeline where each section has a deadline, right, that keeps you accountable, keeps you on track. All right, outlines and flow charts. Again, when you connect the dots, it helps structure your writing even more and helps you connect the information. You want to give yourself enough time to edit and to revise at separate times, okay? And we're going to talk about also sharing it with other people and having other people giving you feedback. But you want to give yourself plenty of time to edit and revise, all right? And to give yourself a break, all right? It's important, again, when you're with time management, maybe some of you already have this, like, okay, this is my time to do my work, and then this is my time to play. Really valuable right now, especially, we're on Zoom right now. You're on Zoom a lot, I'm sure. It's good to take breaks, walk away, stretch your legs, all those things. It's really important in your writing as well. And as you see, when you come back after a break, you have fresh eyes. You might notice the mistakes that you've made. You can find those errors and see if it reads well. It's important to look at that with fresh eyes after a break. Looking at other literature similar to your own field is also important because you can start to look for patterns, for styles of writing that you can then mimic. Because again, if you're reading journals and you're reading specific types of literature, you're going to see these patterns emerge. And then you can start to write in that, and you'll see that there's formats and they're structured in specific ways. It's very helpful. Vocabulary and terminology. Again, I referenced at the start, depending on who you're writing for, it's good to know your audience, but you want to make sure you're using the language of your field. You want to make sure you're using the terms and the vocabulary that your peers are using. All right. So if there's a specific term for a type of experiment or a piece of equipment, make sure you're using that. You can explain it to someone. Make sure you can explain it. Just don't throw words in there just to sound like you're more intelligent. You want to be able to explain those. So if someone comes along and doesn't understand all of that, say you're presenting at the expo and you have these terms in your abstract and people are like, well, can you explain that? You want to be able to explain it, right? So don't throw things in there just to throw it in there. Make sure you can explain it. But you do want to be familiar with those so that you can use those, because there will be times, of course, as well, that people that are very familiar with those terms will start using those terms with you, and you want to be able to have that discussion. So as I said earlier, ask people to read it, your friends. So, hopefully you're making friends, or you're realizing you've got colleagues here in these summer programs. They can look at your abstract before you submit them. Obviously your mentors, probably all of your mentors, are asking to look at your abstracts before you submit them. But maybe there are people that you have back home that are professionals in the field as well. Ask for feedback. All right. Again, it seems obvious to use spell check and grammar check, but my goodness, if you don't, or if you skip that process, it stands out like a red thumb, literally. The red sticks out. So make sure you're using those. Now here at UAB, we use Turnitin. There's also SafeAssign, but you can also, there's plagiarism check software like Chegg and EasyBid that you can also add. Again, just to make sure that you're citing things properly. Here at UAB, and they are open in the summer, and they are open to you as the University Writing Center. You can go to their website and set up a tutoring session, have some look at it for you. They offer workshops. I don't think they are offering any during the summer, but they do the rest of the year. So if you're a UAB student, that's for you. But if you're not a UAB student, you're just here for the summer, you can still take advantage with your UAB email to have someone take a look at your work. All right, so let's talk about authorship now. That's a really important thing to talk about, because hopefully at some point, all of you will be authors of a journal article or review or some such thing related to your research. So here's an example of a publication that Shannon Lynch provided. So you can see up there at the top, you have the lovely title about the research, and then underneath that you have the first author with the one by her name, Shannon Lynch, and next to that you have James E. Boyette and M. Ryan Smith, both of which, by the way, are UAB students that got onto this publication that they did the research with Shannon Lynch. And then the final author is the mentor, Dr. Samantha Giordano Muga. and she's listed there. Again, you want to make sure that everyone is on there that is a major, has contributed something significant to that writing, to that research. All right, you want to make sure their name's there. You don't want to have it out of order. So make sure you're talking with your mentor to make sure this is in the right order. So when you submit your abstract and your research for the expo, you're going to make sure this is in the right order. Okay. So that it's everyone gets the right level of authorship. Authorship is so important in scientific writing. With the journals, if you go into teaching, see, being published is huge. Your publications lead to funding, so it's really important that you have as a goal to be part of an article and be an author. And if you're a first author with something, that's fantastic. As an undergrad, it's not often that it happens, but it can. But again, make sure that you are working with your mentor, that everything is credited the right way. So as I said there, it's being published, it's the currency in the academic world, the academia, that you get more notice within your specific field, the more publications you have. Last week, I put up a link to scholars@uab.edu. Excuse me while I take a drink. But you can actually click on faculty profiles there, and there's a tab just for publications. And I always tell students when they're looking at these faculty profiles, see how recent their publications are, see how many publications they have, all of those things, because it is the currency of how people are rated in that field. All right. And as we said earlier, the first author, that's the person who does the majority of the work. The middle authors, they've contributed to the work, but they aren't the one that has done the most work. And then, as I said, the final author is usually the mentor, the PI, the principal investigator, that helped with all the revisions, the editing, the feedback. Maybe they helped with the experimental design or helped you design the questions. Perhaps they provided the funding for that project. That's why you want them on there. So authorship is really important. All right. So the last thing we're going to talk about now is the revision process. Rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. A lot of revision in scientific writing. Partially because it is a collaborative process, right? As we just saw, there can be multiple authors in a scientific journal article. Very often are, almost always are. So it's important to have meetings and collaboration in the writing process as well. Make sure everyone is on the same page, pun intended. You want to make sure that you're discussing the topics of who is writing what so that you can get the right credit. You're going to make sure things are divided in such a way that is equitable, that, if you're the lead writer, you are doing a good portion of it, the majority of it, but that other people, if they're going to be an author, that they need to help contribute to that. Those deadlines we talked about earlier, so important for everyone to be on the same page with the deadlines so that you can provide time to edit and revise the work. So you can see as an example there, you may have something that is due August 1st. Well, you should have a finished manuscript that's ready for editing and revision by July 1st. All right. And I'm sure many of you are already adept at using Google Drive or other types of shared drives or software that allows everyone to access the files together. Obviously, this helps tremendously to avoid the miscommunications that can sometimes happen when people are writing or contributing the same work. It also helps with editing and revisions, and there's all sorts of ways to use that software that helps with that. Make sure you're maximizing that. Prior to the submission, the one singular author, normally the first author, should edit the manuscript to be in the tone of voice and style of writing for ease of reading, which should be approved by all authors. So it's important that it doesn't sound like it's from 5 different people, that there is a singular voice behind it. I'm sure you've all seen sometimes really bad movies that might have had 5 or 6 screenwriters, for example, and it shows there's probably like poor character development or just random things happen. You don't want your scientific writing to be like that. You want it to be clear and concise, right? And obviously, you also want everyone to be on the same page. All the authors agree on the tone and the style, so that it's easier for people to read. So before it gets to publishing, once you've got it ready to submit, you're going to submit it to a journal. And again, I want to emphasize there are wonderful undergraduate journals that you can submit articles to. So do some research. We have some great links on our website. I'm happy to even talk with anyone individually about this process, but we have a lot of great undergraduate journals. But again, if you're working with a mentor, the mentor will also help obviously guide you to a specific journal that they have targeted probably that they want to submit to. But make sure, no matter which way you're doing it, that you are really looking over the requirements for that specific journal, because they may have specific fonts that they want you to use, specific styles, obviously how long it is, how many figures you can use, all of those things. You want to make sure that you understand that before you submit it so that you can already take care of some of those basic issues so that you don't have to revise that part of it. Because the editorial team, they're going to ask for revisions, all right, through a review board. The review board is a team of editors and reviewers, and they're assigned to work on your article. It's an anonymous group of people that have been selected to review the article based on how much they know about your specific subject. It can sometimes be contentious, but it's usually a very, I think, important process for people to go through, all right? And this goes for when you're looking at something, you want to make sure it's peer reviewed. So if it's an undergraduate journal, you will have probably a mixture of undergraduates who are part of that editorial board with professors and PIs and mentors, all right? And then of course, non-undergraduate journals, those are going to be people who are experts in the field, who are very knowledgeable about that specific subject matter. Each of those people are individually going to look at those articles. They're going to make comments. They're going to offer suggestions. And ultimately, they decide if it's going to be published, right? So they're either going to accept it or they're going to reject the article for publication. So, so again, part of this collaboration, all right, having specific times to meet, and obviously in the Zoom world, this is important. Designate times where you can all get together. But then now that you're in this process of revision, you now want to have specific times to revise. And also to how you're going to respond to some of the comments. There may be some comments that you can say, hey, we really feel strongly about this. Here's why. Okay. And maybe you can make an argument as to why something should be left in or not taken out. You want to make sure that you're dividing this work between the team. All right, according to who's kind of written which sections, because again, people are going to write different sections, and make sure that they're responding to the area that's they're responsible for. But one person is going to be the main go-to person for communicating with the editorial team. Not everyone at once, just one person. All right, and again, Google Drive, Box, there's great ways to designate roles to collaborate on one of these articles. And then, of course, you want to make sure everyone's comfortable, the whole team is comfortable with the revisions, or as I said, a rebuttal to a reviewer. You can actually, if you're confident with something, you can say, here's why we think it needs to stay in the article. We feel it's important because of this, this, and this, right? You can have a rebuttal. So this is another way to break it down, the review form. You can see some of the feedback that someone has gotten. A discussion board can be created for communication between the authors and the editorial team. And as you go through each stage, you'll see that things will be checked off so that you can see how far along you are and you have a way to track your progress. And each reviewer will have their own tab for comments and suggestions of the manuscript. Each reviewer then will be giving this feedback through the comments and suggestions. They're going to assess the quality of the manuscript. You can see in the red boxes here an example of some feedback where it says the authors should expand on some of the concepts explained in box Q3, question 3. Down at the bottom, minor revisions, these types of things. They can be really in depth and specific. Sometimes they're a little bit vague. You can ask for clarification from the reviewers. And they'll respond to questions that you have. So if you do need clarification, they can respond to that. So again, this is the whole process. Now that you're in the revision side of it, you're going to resubmit it. Journals accept submission and assign editorial review board. It's going to be interviewed by or reviewed by the independent review board. As we said, it's interactive. You can see the comments that are made by the reviewers. And you have the opportunity to revise directly in there and resubmit the changes that you've made. They can come back with more edits before they accept the finalized manuscript. Sometimes it takes a while. So there's third or fourth revisions that are requested. And then ultimately they make their final decision. So in conclusion of this process, you want to review the format. You're going to compare and contrast different academic writing styles. We've talked about strategies that can help you for this writing process and ways to cite specific to scientific writing. We've talked about ways that you can find resources to help improve your writing, such as the Writing Center. We've talked about the authorship and how important it is that where people land with on that, as well all the roles that people play within the author process. And we've talked about details that are connected with the revision process when you submit to a journal. All right, so there was a lot of information there. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to look in the chat here real quick to see if people had some questions. So let's see, some folks sent me a direct message. I'm not going to say who asked because it's a great question. So it says some papers include both a conclusion and a discussion. What would be the difference there? So again, you want to look at the format that is submitted to that journal. So you can read other articles that are part of that journal to see if they have a preference there. But, a conclusion is where you start to analyze your results, right? And you talk about how they either answered your hypothesis or they didn't, what are future directions. But that then can be the discussion after that can be those future directions, right? So are you going to continue this research in this specific way? Or are you going to go in this other different avenue? So you can discuss that. But again, I highlight the importance of looking specifically at that journal and the articles that they publish and see if they distinguish between those two things, if they have their own internal definition of those. And you'll see that because again, with journals, it's very structured and you can see the formats that they have. But that's a great question. Let's see, question about recording accessing this recording. Absolutely. I will send out a link. We'll edit it just a little bit, just so it's a little more clear and concise. And we'll make sure that it gets sent to all of the folks who are part of the summer programs. So good question on that. There's also Shannon Lynch's original presentation is on our YouTube as well. So good questions there. Let's see if I have missed any other questions that people have asked. Aha, I think I just answered the where can the recording of this be found? YouTube. Yes, so we put these up on our YouTube channel. So, and sometimes we have multiple presenters for the same topic because you get slightly different information. But yeah, you can go to our YouTube channel and access them. But I will make sure that this specific recording is sent out to all the summer programmers too. So, any other questions at this point? Trying to see if anyone has, Is there an online tool to prepare the literature matrix? Yes, in fact, I have a template that I will send out to all of the summer programmers as well, that I think is very effective, that you can then modify to what you need. You know, if you need to add stuff to it, that's fine, but it's a really basic template for a literature matrix. And yeah, I'll be happy to send that out. Other questions? And if it's a question about summer programming, I can answer some of those too. The grad school, hopefully y'all had a good time at the graduate fair today. And next week we will have a social program on Tuesday with a movie and food. But I'm not seeing any hands up at this time or any other questions. Again, feel free to shoot me an email directly. I'm going to drop it into the chat as well. So if you have a question that comes up later, you can ask me directly. I'm happy to answer those. So there's my email, ghjones@uab.edu. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have that you didn't ask today. All right, well, if no one has any other questions, I'll go ahead and let y'all go, but thanks for being here, and keep an eye on your email for a link to all these things we just talked about. So thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it. Have a great day.